access to broadband is an equivalent to access to utilities like water and electricity at this point. Just being able to apply for jobs and being able to get telehealth in certain regions. If you're not focused on a day-to-day, it's easy to just be ignorant of the fact that certain folks actually have to go to Starbucks in order to have Wi-Fi. They actually have to go to a McDonald's in order to do. Some students have to go to McDonald's to do their homework. It is a critical tool that is necessary to function in society.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tech Pathways. I'm Jose, your host and the president of Zeta. Today's episode features someone whose journey embodies the intersection of perseverance, policy, and purpose. Kenley Joseph. Kenley is a telecommunications and media attorney who currently serves as Tech and Telecom's Policy Counsel at the Multicultural Media, Telecom and Internet Council. From his roots in South Florida as a child of Haitian immigrants to his current work advocating for fair and inclusive access to digital infrastructure, Kenley's story is one of resilience and drive. He's a powerful voice in tech policy with a background that spans big law, government service, and public interest work. In today's episode, we'll talk about the personal moments that have shaped Kenley's path, what it means to expand digital access in the age of AI, and how Gen Z can help build a more inclusive tech future. It's really good to see you, Kenley. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing well. Appreciate the intro. It was very flattering. So thank you. And I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation. And I know we've known each other, I want to say at least 2 years now that like we've kind of run around each other in DC.
Yeah.
And I want to say that was like pretty early on to when you were coming over here. But it's been great to see all the work that you're doing in Washington, all the work that you've been a part of, the voice that you're bringing to the work. And so I just knew that, we wanted to make sure you were joining the conversation on the podcast. So it's really great to have you, and I'm excited to kind of dive into some of these components of your story and your journey in the work. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a good journey, So excited to talk about it. I'm not too accustomed to talk about myself, but it's to
Yeah.
be I think a fun convo since you're good people,
Yeah.
and so always a good time talking to good folks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we really appreciate your time, and there's a lot here to kind of dive into, right? When we're thinking about your work and the legal work aspect, but also the drive in community and the perspective that's so important, particularly in times like these, as we're seeing a massive evolution. And we'll get into it, but like you put out a lot of content, particularly around AI, and so I think it's so timely for folks to hear your story and how you came into this work and have found leadership in your work and in the voice. But I want to start us off in the conversation by taking a step back, learning a little bit about you, some of that family influence and origin story. So let's start at the beginning. You've shared that your parents immigrated from Haiti and that your father's career shift played a big role in how you saw opportunity growing up. How did their journey as immigrants shape your own ideas of success and ambition growing up?
Yeah, so the main thing was just the emphasis on education. Because coming from Haiti, having been educated back in Haiti, and understanding that at least from their perspective, the path to success involved being educated. And so from early on, I understood from my perspective that I needed to be educated in order to have a chance at success. I understand now that it's not the only path, but it's a path that I chose in large part because of the example that my parents set forth. And I think it served me well. And so that's something that I plan to keep with myself and pass on to the youngins as they grow up.
Yeah.
My youngins, that is. I have 2 kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So when things get tough now for you, right, as a professional, as a leader, as a father, how do you continue to channel the drive that they modeled for you now as an adult?
Just thinking about what they likely had to go to and what they've told me they had to go through on the path from Haiti to the U.S., being dishwashers initially at hotels and working while going to school. And I just think about the fact that I am in a much more privileged position than they were in when they first got here. And so it helps me to contextualize whatever it is I'm going through, whatever challenge I'm facing. I realized that my parents set the example of how to overcome challenges, and I'm able to pull from that and again contextualize whatever challenge I'm facing, and which allows me to realize that whatever it is, I can get through it so long as I put the work in.
Yeah. And so often, right, like those journeys, those immigrant journeys, whether they're ours or our parents, really do help us kind of have that sense of orientation, because we have a clear understanding of the opportunities that are presented in front of us, right? The perspective that not everybody is born with those opportunities. You've mentioned that one of those moments that really shaped you in your development was your father's passing when you were very young. And I know that these, very immediate losses can be very impactful, very long-lastingly impactful, right? And really reshape a person. How did that experience on the personal side shape your journey as you were going through kind of, your trajectory and envisioning your future?
It was impactful for sure. Because growing up, my dad was my hero, and so it was something that, in looking back, definitely changed my personality to a certain extent. I was much more of a like goofy class clown type of kid growing up, and so um, looking back, I can see the shift even unintentionally in my personality, how I view things, how close I allowed myself to get to certain things and certain people generally. And so it's been a good and bad thing, actually, because when it comes to professional development and growth, I'm able to keep a distance, so to speak, in terms of being too emotionally invested, which allows me to just focus on the task at hand. And just whatever failures or challenges I face, I'm better prepared, I think, to bounce back, knowing that I've overcome something as traumatic as my father passing. But it also comes with challenges because it puts me in a position where I have to be more intentional about connecting with the individuals who I love and I care about, including my wife. She's been pivotal in helping me open up more, be more vulnerable, and allow myself to get closer to the people I love and care about. And so it's again been a gift and a curse. But overall, I'm grateful for who I am today. So it's something that I try to stay on the positive side of as I reminisce on it occasionally, which I inevitably do.
Yeah, of course. And I can imagine that, with, again, particularly the narrative of being a first generation American, you kind of carry that legacy of that really, important intergenerational transition. And I say that from firsthand experience as an immigrant myself, that came here when I was very young. I was 3 years old, so I don't necessarily remember too much of the actual transition, but carrying that forward, right? Like there is kind of a legacy that you feel is really important to a story to hold and to kind of carry with you as you are then entering these new life stages. And I have a prop here as an example, but this particular hat is actually, it's not mine. This is my late grandfather's farming hat, avocado farmer, cow farmer from rural Mexico. And I keep it right here as a really close reminder, that I am building on a legacy and, really always trying to be mindful of opportunities that I have that were not afforded to people before me, right?
Right.
And it's important to keep those reminders close. I think this is the first time I also tell folks what this hat is and what it represents. So appreciate the opportunity to be able to share that as well. But it is important, right? These things shape us and we carry them with us as then we take on these new roles in our life. as a kid, you were a very curious kid. I identify with that a lot. And you were curious about a lot of different career paths. At different points, you were interested in, writing, law, psychology, which I think are all kind of intersectional in some way, right? Which with what
Right.
you ended up kind of going into. When did law specifically start to stand out to you as more than just, one of those many interests?
hmm Um, the first time was probably middle school. I
Mm.
had a class in middle school where the teacher, interestingly enough, always talked about going to law school. I think he started law school and then left to go be a teacher, but always talked about going back. And so in his lesson plans, he would do legal activities and challenges and whatnot. And one of them was to do a closing argument. I can't remember the specific topic, but each student had to draft a closing argument for a particular case and then present it in front of the class. That experience showed me that it was just the thought experiment of writing out the argument that I had, and then at the time building the courage to actually get in front of the class and present it and try to be persuasive. I found all of that entertaining and fun, and so I thought, well, maybe in addition to psychology, I might consider law at some point. And it wasn't until undergrad that it came back around as a thing that I would actually pursue. And so the first time though was probably was probably middle school when I had
Yeah.
that one assignment from that one teacher.
Wow. Wow. Talk about like an experience that like someone gives you the opportunity to partake in that has an impact that like they probably couldn't even begin to fathom,
Right.
right? Like those are like life-changing moments. And I've said this before, but shout out to the teachers, because teachers really, are out here giving us those like life-changing moments, to move us in those directions. I as someone who like has picked up so many different interests and has such a strong curiosity around so many different areas, I can imagine you still carry a lot of that curiosity with you, right? And like you're inquisitive about different things. Do you find that like all these different interests come into your work in the law, like that you kind of tap into them for your work today in ways that maybe are unexpected?
Yes, for sure. Because a lot of it, I think, focused on just my interest in how think people land on their conclusions, like what pathways their minds took to get to what it is they are saying at the moment, whether it be an argument or whether it be just a random observation about something. I often think about the train of thought people have leading to their statements. And so as I'm drafting something, whether it be a comment at the FCC or trying to put together something to present in front of a group, I often put myself in their shoes to think about how they might receive the information and what train they might train of thought I might set off, and hopefully the best way to get that train to the station I wanted to get to. And so it's definitely something that is constantly playing in the background in my mind. And something that I think is an asset as I talk to folks, engage with people, because it's not just professional; it's on the interpersonal level, talking to folks on the train, on the sidewalk, wherever. That interest in how folks think and what they're thinking about and how they got there, I think, has served me well in multiple aspects.
I want to dive into some of the educational background, because I
Mm-hmm.
think it's interesting, kind of what you ended up studying in university and how that then kind of built into your career. But I have a bit of a follow up question here, if you'll entertain me. What is
Mm-hmm.
like the activity that is not related to the law, or like the hobby or interest you have, that you feel just gives you like fresh perspective when you come back to the work in law? Like, do you have a like an activity or a hobby that you really like, that just kind of like for you creates a balance in your work?
An activity. I haven't done it in a while now, but back when I did spoken word poetry, trying to write out a I'm not gonna say like a story in a way that would have the best impact. So like setting up the quote unquote punchline or the line at the end and thinking about how to get to that end, I think is helpful because even when I go back to when I'm writing, thinking about how I like it's almost like because of how roundabout sometimes spoken word poetry can be in order to make sure you build up the most suspense and whatnot leading up to the punchline, I almost kind of invert that in legal writing because oftentimes in legal writing you have to be upfront about what it is you're saying, what it is, what the point is, from a topic sentence to a heading to whatever it is. It has to be upfront, and so I kind of try to invert the thing I do in my hobby in legal writing, and I think that exercise is able to help me to be more clear and precise.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're exercising two kind of complementary and yet like approaching from different angles writing
Mm-hmm.
styles, and I can imagine that that's like really it's a good activity like for the brain, even though they're kind of breaks from each other or they're exercising those different parts.
Mm-hmm.
It creates like an understanding of kind of this dual approach to communicating narrative and message, right? I think that's a
Yeah.
really good segue into the next question, diving a little bit more into some of your educational background. You ended up double majoring in psychology and philosophy at
Mm-hmm.
Florida Atlantic, which was your father's alma mater. How did studying those two fields influence the way you think about solving problems, right? I mean, two very kind of like psychological, mental oriented areas of study, then going into like the law, right? Analysis of the law. Like, how did that influence your problem solving?
I think it played a significant role because it helped me to, well, philosophy on one hand helped me to structure my thought processes. And so, because sometimes, even if especially if I'm not being mindful of the train of thought, so to speak, I can be all over the place in terms of what I'm thinking about, trying to make connections. And so, philosophy helped me to kind of again structure thought, like finding out what the premise is and how to connect from the premise to the conclusion. I think has been critical, and being able to think critically about issues I think is paramount in just life in general. And so it's extremely grateful for that training because I also had great professors at Florida Atlantic in both philosophy and psychology. I ended up gravitating a little bit more towards philosophy after getting more coursework in that field and engaging more of the professors. And on the psychology side, it helped me to, I guess, fan the flame of that curiosity in terms of how people think and what helps people get to the conclusions they get to, and helps me to understand the fact that I guess both of them help me understand the fact that two people can look at the same thing and have completely different experiences. And one of the things that still sticks with me is in psychology is the gorilla experiment, which I'm not sure if you heard about, but essentially it's an experiment where a group of folks are throwing a ball around the room, and you're supposed to, I think, count how many times the ball is passed between folks. And during the experiment, they'll have like a dude or person in a gorilla costume walk by, and because you're so focused on counting the number of passes, you completely miss the gorilla. And so it helps me to realize that some folks, even if they look like they're being intentionally difficult about something by ignoring a reality that's clear as day, oftentimes because of how hyper focused they might be on a particular issue, it could genuinely be an innocent oversight based off of, again, how hyper focused they might be on something. And so it helps me to give folks grace and have lower expectations about certain folks in certain situations, which allows me to not be as reactive in what would otherwise be potentially tense situations.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating like tidbit of information, right? And I have heard of this experiment before. I've actually like I've
Mm,
seen videos of it, and it's
yep.
like it where you completely fall for it is the audience, right? Like, and they tell you like follow the passes, and you
Yeah.
do, and then they're like, "Did you notice the gorilla?" I've seen this on like a TV show or something on Netflix,
Mm,
um, and and I love the way that you apply that then to like work in policy or thinking about engaging stakeholders and operating from a place of of knowing what assumptions not to make and not to
Mm,
draw around someone's understanding of an issue, right?
right.
I think that is so important in the work that we do on policy, engaging all sorts of stakeholders, and I think some folks struggle with that, and so I'm seeing firsthand how you're able to bring in some of those components into your day to day just in this conversation. I think that's really valuable. It must have been like an incredibly, fulfilling experience for you to also share that alma mater with your father, I'm sure. And what was kind of the feeling for you and being able to be there and pursue this the academic journey, recognizing that you had that commonality with your dad.
It was dope. Like it was something that I had made up my mind about pretty early on. So it was like I'm going to a Florida Atlantic, and then we'll see what else I do. And while I was there, it was awesome to be able to walk the halls and have a sense that he was with me on some level. Of course, the school grew significantly from when he attended to when I was there, but at the same time, just being able to envision like it's a relatively large campus. So envisioning on some days where I was either upset or struggling with something, or just in a good mood, even walking from one class all the way across the campus to the next, envisioning sometimes him walking with me and having conversations with him about things. It was it was grounding, and it felt pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful experience to be able to share that. And then from there you went to Howard Law, which I think is also incredible. So coming out here to DC, what made
Mhm.
that experience so pivotal for you in terms of a legal training, being in the heart of our political infrastructure, our legal infrastructure in Washington D.C. Tell me a little bit about what that transition was like for you coming to Howard.
It was phenomenal. Howard Law has definitely been one of the pillars of my career and personal life. Being around that many beautiful Black folks, brilliant Black folks who are all on par in terms of their intellect, their drive, um, just the vibe. It was awesome because Florida Atlantic is a PWI, predominantly white institution, but because of my ties to my father, I didn't really have any kind of feel any type of way about it because in my mind I was talking to my pops on a regular basis. But going to Howard and again being around that many beautiful Black folks who are brilliant and come from all kinds of diverse backgrounds, it was awesome. And the training there was phenomenal as well. Um, in just because of the legacy of the school, obviously Thurgood Marshall, first Supreme Court Justice, went there, and Charles Hamilton Houston has the quote that you're either a social engineer or a social parasite, and so it's something that they ingrain in you that you should be, to the best of your ability, trying to contribute to society in some capacity as a lawyer. And so, whether it was, which is part of the reason why I made some of the decisions I made while at in big law, and part of the reason why I made the decision to come here to MMTC where I am, is to keep that in mind because there's ways to do it that's not necessarily just you can be a social engineer without necessarily doing public interest work. You can do it in private sector. You just have to be mindful of it. And so it's yeah, the training there has been phenomenal. And of course, on the personal side, so I met my wife. I married my law school sweetheart, and we now have two beautiful kids here in DC. So yeah, I can't be more grateful for
Yeah.
Howard Law and how it's impacted my life.
Yeah. My follow-up question was going to be like, what were some of the core, like, kind of life-changing moments that you experienced? But you just gave us a huge one, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Are there any other moments as you were going through law school at Howard where you were like, wow, this is like monumental, or like this is an experience I'm never going to forget? Because I mean, there's history being made
Mhm.
constantly, right, in our surrounding area here in Washington D.C. So, do you have any other moments like that while you were at Howard that you were just like, wow, like out of body, like this is special?
Um, let's see. Something that's probably small to some folks, but I felt pretty connected to was we had a protest. I think it was the mannequin challenge that we did. I can't remember. Unfortunately, it's been too many unfortunate events with police brutality, but it was in response to one of the events, and we did the mannequin challenge as a protest to highlight the injustice, and just I don't think I could imagine that something like that happening back at Florida Atlantic. And so being at an HBCU where so everybody was on the same page and engaging and uh, having a first person connection with the challenge that was being presented and the emotional impact that stuff like that happening in the world was having on all of us and coming together to do something was something that I definitely that stuck with me and I greatly appreciate.
Yeah, I think those are really unique moments, and our student body across the institutions here in Washington D.C. I do think are hyper engaged, and
Mm-hmm.
Howard is certainly not an exception. I think our students at Howard are, incredibly organized, engaged, thoughtful students when it comes to advocacy work. They are very present in the city. I went to university at American, so like we were constantly kind of seeing the interaction through some really historic moments of all the student bodies in DC, and our students from Howard always show up during these really critical moments. Fast forward, from your time at law school, you were working at Willkie, Farr, and Gallagher. You not only advised major clients, but also led some pro bono case work that resulted in compassionate release. What did that work and that particular moment teach you about the power of legal advocacy?
It that was definitely the highlight of my professional career, like with the bar none. And it's something that, yeah, it definitely showed the impact of legal advocacy because the gentleman that we were representing had been incarcerated for a significant amount of time. It was over 40 years total. And at the time, he actually had cancer and was somebody who had a past for sure. Like as a young man, he was a problem. But in terms of the decisions he was making, he admitted it and was very candid and upfront about his struggles as a young man. But over time, he grew, he matured, he put in the work to take coursework and develop and grow as an individual. And so it was clear to me and our team that he was somebody who was deserving of release aside from his cancer diagnosis. And so um, the work showed me that there's often more than one way to get to their end goal because when we started his representation the goal was for him to get parole. He was coming up for a parole hearing, um, and the unfortunate result was he was denied again because of his past and just the tenor of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It's a challenge often to engage with certain folks within that system. I'll just leave that there. But there was a statute that was passed around COVID that allowed us to pivot and then instead file for compassionate release. And our team, through a lot of work, a lot of just grinding, was able to get him released, and he was eternally grateful. We This was several years ago, but several years after the fact, we were still texting, "Happy Fourth of July, happy whatever holiday," and um, it showed that again, it's the right representation can completely change somebody's life because he went from being in a maximum security prison, even though he was an advanced age, to being home with his sister within 3 days of the order being released by the judge. So it was a expeditious transition and um, again highlighted my career, something that I
Wow.
am eternally grateful to have been a part of and something that underscores again the value of good legal advocacy.
Yeah, 100%. You spent 6 years in big law and
Mm-hmm.
made the transition to then work, with nonprofit advocacy efforts. What was that transition like for you, and how did you know that you were ready to make that transition?
So this was interesting for sure because the pace, particularly at the time where I made the transition, was different. Big law pace is not quite what the pace is at MMTC,
Hmm.
but it was something that I felt was timely. There's a lot going on at the time, but one of the things that was going on was my desire to do more public speaking, because at the firm, beyond the pro bono stuff that I was doing, I didn't get a lot of opportunities to speak to speak to folks. There's a lot of drafting, head down, grinding. And so I believed in my mind, probably in part from that middle school experience where I gave the oral argument, I believed that I might be okay or decent at public speaking, but had not been privy to the opportunities to do so. And so I figured now would be the time to step away, enter a space where I would be in a position to do that as the primary goal of my job, as opposed to just something I do on the side. And fortunately, at MMTC, I've had that opportunity. I've been able to be on certain panels. I've been able to do testimonies and give presentations, and fortunately, been able to confirm that I am a solid public speaker. So it was
Yeah.
a decision that I am grateful that I made, and in hindsight, I believe it was the right one.
Yeah, yeah, you absolutely are. I mean, I've had the chance to listen to you firsthand, and I'm so glad that we have someone with your background, your like legal context, the compassion that you carry in these circles, communicating as a leader and as a voice in these spaces in DC.
Appreciate it.
Talking a little bit more about your work with MMTC, you've worked on a range of issues from AI, and I read all the content you put out on AI.
Thank you.
So I
Thank you.
follow that work, which is really cool. To broadband access, to spectrum policy, digital inclusion. You're talking a little bit about kind of, and we're getting into, your passion for being able to speak to folks and kind of connect on these topics, be more kind of public facing. Aside from that, what else keeps you passionate about the work that you're doing now?
Just the need for it, really. Like there's, I think it's easy for folks who don't have access to broadband and some of the digital tools that are available to undervalue the significance and importance of having access to those tools, right? And so it's something that knowing that there are folks, including my mom, for example, and some of my cousins, who are like they understand from a distance. Like they're very much removed because their day-to-day work does not necessarily require them to be on the internet. But um, when they are in need of certain communications, they go to the internet. And so for me, it's important to make sure that those who even don't appreciate the value of it get access to it so they can then learn the importance of it. Like something as simple as, not simple, but something like AI, where it's the more you use it, the better you get at using it, the more you can be creative with how to use it. You don't get that if you don't have access to it. And so making sure that folks who oftentimes turn a blind eye, not because of, uh, not for no other reason than just the fact that they don't see the current value in it. Make sure that they understand the value, give them access so they can make the most of it, because others who are excelling and progressing have access. And it's an unequal playing field if certain folks are just ignoring the value and the importance of having that access.
Right. Yeah. And I'm curious to ask a follow up question there. What's something you think specifically more people should understand about the stakes of access in today's tech landscape?
Just how critical it is. Like it's access to broadband and increasingly AI is, well, let's leave that to the side. Access to broadband is an equivalent to access to utilities like water and electricity at this point. It is essential to be a functioning member of society these days to have access to broadband. Again, some folks just see it as the connection to social media, and that's completely fine. Do whatever you want on social media, that's responsible. But just being able to apply for jobs and being able to get telehealth in certain regions. I think some folks just don't realize, like in our space, everybody here understands the value of broadband because we talk about ad nauseum with the digital divide. But if you're not focused on it on a day to day, it's easy to just be ignorant of the fact that certain folks actually have to go to Starbucks in order to have Wi-Fi. They actually have to go to a McDonald's in order to do. Some students have to go to McDonald's to do their homework. Like it is a critical tool that is necessary to function in society. And I think outside of this space, some folks don't quite appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm smiling as I'm hearing this because like the thing that always comes to mind when I hear about, the broadband access conversation is growing up in a small rural town in
Mm-hmm.
California.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when like Netflix came out and like folks were making a craze about like, Netflix and blah blah blah. And I'd like log on to try to watch like a show and it would just buffer
Right.
for like forever. And you'd be like, I guess I'm not watching like, this today. It's just
Right.
the odds are not in my favor. And it's the access. It's like access is still so critical for so many folks, and we are moving at this like lightning speed
Mm-hmm.
in the way that
Mm-hmm.
we're incorporating the digital world into our day-to-day lives. That gap just becomes more and more prominent, right,
Mm-hmm.
in to the folks that are still struggling to get access. I was having a conversation with a congressional office on the Hill just like 2 weeks ago maybe, and I was blown away by the number they gave me, which is that 40% of their constituents still did not have access, like strong access to the internet. And
Right.
that number to me is like is just like, even to me growing up in that scenario, hard to wrap my head around 40%. And there is an overlap in that 40% with demographic like demographic components of the population and historical
Mm-hmm.
marginalization there too. And
Yeah.
so, we can talk about this issue through a lot of different lenses of socioeconomic issues, like prejudice issues and histories and like racial dynamics in certain areas where we see, unserved, underserved communities. These gaps are there, they're present, and communities are still trying to get connected in a lot of places. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentor students, and I've referenced this already, but you publish regularly on AI policy. What role do you see more voices, and particularly younger voices, playing in shaping AI and the future of AI?
Well, I think the more voices, the better, because it's a situation where, um, you know, the training and the foundation level of AI is critical. And those who are at the table, those who are in the rooms, who are compiling and drafting and building these algorithms, need to be diverse. It's something that, again, I talk about in the Black AI Optimist column that I put out, is the 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 how critical it is for as many diverse voices to be engaged and involved as possible. Because the biases that exist are just in AI are a carryover from the biases that exist in humanity. And so the only true way to mitigate that is to make sure that those who are in the rooms building these things are as diverse as possible. Because an example of a similar example is a situation with the I think it was water systems, water dispensers in bathrooms that would not work on folks who had any melanin in their skin because during the training they only had primarily white folks in there, and so when it came to folks with anything but white skin, they had trouble with uh, putting the water out. Similarly, uh, I think facial recognition technology is a little bit behind in terms of how best to identify and differentiate folks of color because they have not been trained on as many minority and folks of color as necessary to be as accurate as they can be. And I think it's there is a natural and very understandable fear of AI and having too much of your information gathered up and used up to train these systems. But I actually do believe that the more that diverse voices and faces are engaged, the better. The more information they have on how we interact, how we um, communicate, how we just live lives, the better they are able to serve us. Because while that is scary to give info to these systems, they're getting info from other communities. And so when those communities step up to use these systems, they will naturally be more successful in their use because the training data they are being that they're pulling from is a lot more accurate because it's so much more expansive and diverse. So if we as a community are withholding our information out of fear, which again is very understandable, at the end of the day, that will end up being to our detriment, in my opinion. I think it's a little controversial to say that, but that's actually where I stand on that. So, in short, the more voices, the better, and the more necessary they actually are in order to help these systems be beneficial to our communities.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think it's so important for people to show up in adopting these tools so that we have a say and are at the table when thinking about how we're refining them to better serve us in the future, right? Whether it's young people, people of color, folks from like different socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, we need to be present and engaged in these tools. And I think we've seen that in other evolutions of technology with like the dot-com boom, right? And like initial kind of integration into online spaces. And we have an opportunity where we can really say as communities, yes, let us like take a lead in this. And so I think there's education to continue to do there and more voices to elevate. So could not agree more. I want to touch a little bit on some of the work that you've done with some of our legislative bodies. So you were a part of the FCC's Consumer Advisory Committee, and as a part of that committee, you testified before different legislative bodies. What has stood out to you most in that work? What stood out to you most in engaging directly with some of these policymakers and being part of that ecosystem?
What stood out to me most is essentially the value of numbers. Like it's important to something that I didn't quite appreciate before coming up to the policy space was the importance of having a crowd or a group of folks with you who share the same mission and perspective on a particular issue. For a while, I was under the impression that if I have a top tier flawless argument about the value of a particular policy, then that would carry the day. But that is not the case. In hindsight, I probably should have realized that going in because they are folks who navigate based off of constituents and they work on votes and numbers. So it should have been intuitive, but I didn't have a full appreciation for it until coming into the space and realizing that there is absolutely strength in numbers.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a clear and simple message to send to folks. What other advice would you give younger folks looking to engage policymakers or work with policymakers that you've also picked up from some of this firsthand engagement yourself?
Couple things. One, have a clear ask, because I feel like oftentimes folks who are engaging with policymakers are focused on expressing their issues and concerns, but not necessarily having an ask. And so, whatever the issues are, condense and consolidate them to the point where you can have a practical step forward towards resolving the issue and then go before the whatever policymaker or legislative body so that when you're communicating with them, they're not just listening to complaints, which are valid. You need to be able to communicate your grievances with those in charge, but have a plan, have a plan of action that they can take. And number two, the more clear and the more the more effectively you can clear the pathway towards action, the more likely your odds of success, right? So what that looks like is essentially if you want a particular action to be taken, note that you have, for example, a number of folks who are already on board, which goes back to the numbers thing, which lets the person who is being tasked or requested to act know that you're not just a single person. And if they are able to do, if they wanted to do what you are asking them to do, they would have support from others. So essentially, one, have a clear ask, and two, numbers. Get as many numbers as you can to back whatever it is you're asking for, so that it makes it easier for the person you're asking to do something to do that thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's kind of another follow-up question there that I have in thinking about the complexities of the political organism that we all operate in today. The like ever shifting political landscape and kind of ideologies that come into play here. There is a certain like art to being able to engage as many stakeholders as possible around robust conversations today, and do so in an effective way that allows you to build coalition, bipartisan support. How do you build trust and credibility when you're engaging this complex organism today, aside from numbers and facts? What's your kind of your strategy in trust and credibility building?
Probably authenticity, right? Like it's being as authentic and as direct as you can be. I think is beneficial because in this space, everybody assumes that there is some motive that somebody has when they approach you, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to, as you're being genuine, as you're being your authentic self, not necessarily trying to pander, but as you are being genuine, uh, uh, have that ask and present it in a way that's relatively early in the combo, like so that they're not sitting here listening to you, waiting to figure out what it is you want from them, which can make it so that they might not even hear the introductory stuff as well. Of course, be polite, be personable. It's not purely transactional, but at the end of the day, folks know there's an ask somewhere, and so if you're able to, in your authenticity, present what it is you would like, if there is an ask early, it's beneficial to everybody involved because it saves time and it helps folks be less suspicious about why you're talking to them. That's the first thing. And secondly, I think it's important to engage without an ask sometimes. When you're before a policymaker or a legislative body, that's a separate entity or a separate instance. But when you're just out and about engaging with folks, I think let me rephrase, it's beneficial to go out and about and engage with folks without an agenda and without an ask. And you can present that in your spiel to the folks early on. Say, I'm not necessarily looking for anything right now, but I wanted to introduce myself, I wanted to say hello, and then maybe speak to something that they might be engaging in that you find interesting, so that you're able to potentially down the road re-engage and then have your ask. So carve out time to have a specific ask to have with policymakers and whatnot, and also carve out time just to engage for the sake of engagement in order to build the rapport so that you can then follow up with that time for the ask.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great advice. And I appreciate you saying, even if it's an introductory conversation, present yourself. And what I like to kind of advise folks on, particularly young folks that just want to start to build network with, state elected officials or local elected officials is, go to folks, communicate who you are, and ask them where you might be able to help them, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have alignment in, priorities, or you might have alignment in a vision for change, so that you're also starting a relationship from a place of supporting the work that they're doing that you agree with, right? Right. There is like as a newer organization, lucky enough that we've grown, our community and network to engaging, over 50,000 profiles online every month. We didn't start that way, and when we first started, a lot of the conversations we had on the Hill were, hey, we're building this thing, we're building this community, this is our vision.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting there, right? There's a vision, but right now we really just want to know what you're working on to see where there's alignment, so that we can show you where we can be supportive, where we can amplify the good work you're doing. And that today, with the larger network, has become very fruitful. And so, I would totally echo that piece of advice from you. I think it's definitely beneficial to even start out with a hello. How can I maybe help you? And the authenticity piece, because that folks can get confused sometimes, particularly engaging in our federal policy space. Some folks don't necessarily know that showing up as yourself, as your authentic self, can be a powerful asset when you're talking to folks that are hit with numbers and statistics and white papers every single minute.
Right.
And so those personal narratives can really hit deep with folks. I have one last kind of question for you here. What's one lesson from your personal and professional journey that you think more people should hear, that would make a difference in other people's lives, to kind of have this lesson that you've learned over your trajectory?
Network and treat people well. Like, there's never really value in being unnecessarily cruel or unkind. You know, there's, especially nowadays, there's a lot of disagreement and tension in the space, and so it's easy to go scorched earth on certain folks because of something they might have said or what the case may be. But I think number one, networking will always be something that is valuable to your career, and certain folks throughout my journey have played a significant role in helping to guide me on my path. And I would not be where I am without having met and engaged with those folks. So networking is key. And number two, just be kind. Like, doesn't take much. If somebody is not reciprocating that, it's more often than not very easy to step away and keep it pushing. Oftentimes they have their own things going on that is causing them to engage the way they're engaging, and it's not even about you like that. So taking the time to make it a personal affront does not benefit you. It is best to step away while making sure you are being true to yourself, because you can set boundaries without accepting disrespect. And oftentimes you can do that just by walking away. And so just don't burn bridges unnecessarily, and network. You're going to hear that. Folks will hear that throughout their career because it's sound advice. But I'm going to be one more person to echo that because it even took me a while to really let that sink in my career, because early on in my career, I was more focused on just keeping my head down and grinding, which is valuable. You get a lot of experience, you get a lot of expertise. You can oftentimes establish a reputation for knowing what you're doing by being so focused on your work. But that should also be accompanied and supplemented with networking to establish your network, to have folks you can reach out to in both difficult and beneficial times or fruitful times. Because you never know where your either next opportunity is going to come from, or who might know who that allows you to get into a door you otherwise would have absolutely no way to get into. And so networking and just be kind.
Absolutely. And network for the long term too, right? Like plant those seeds.
Right.
Plant those seeds, understanding that it might be a while before you're able to actually engage somebody that you've started to build a relationship with. but knowing that like at some point you have a genuine connection with somebody that wherever they might go, wherever you might end up, is there. And I think some folks fall into kind of the trap of being a little bit more transactional of like, hi, my name is so and so, what do you do? And kind of think on the immediate, right? And that's a very common DC introduction, right? What do you do, right? And whereas in other places, that's like insulting to ask. But
and another thing,
but
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say another thing is while you're networking, to not take a lack of response, especially for immediately, as an offense. Like folks are often insanely busy, and so even if there have been plenty of times where I've received an email, I'm like, oh, and I respond in my head, I get another email or a text about something I'm working on, get to that, start responding, and in my mind, I've responded to the person, but I've actually not sent it. It's just in the draft of my email or in the draft of my phone, and I've moved on to the next thing just because I've been so busy. But do not take offense to that. Like one thing I try to say to myself repeatedly is like, offense is an offering. It's up to you whether or not you take it. And so I do my best to not take offense to anything. Even oftentimes, even when somebody's trying to be offensive, I just keep it pushing. But yes, don't take a lack of response as a personal affront. Keep on trying, take your ego out of it. Just reach out. If you truly want to connect with that person, reach out as long as it takes. And there are plenty of people. So just keep diversify who you reach out to.
Yeah. Oh, that was good. That was really good. I'm going to close this out here by asking our signature question. We ask everybody that comes on this one question to kind of end on a lighter note. What is your current favorite tech tool? It could be a physical tool. It could be a software, some sort of online thing that you're using right now. What's your current favorite tech tool and why?
Current favorite tech tool? It might be Notebook LM's podcast feature. Because it's, again, anything you are truly studying and diving into, you should be reading yourself. Like AI is still very much prone to mistakes, but it is because I listen to podcasts on a regular basis, the options to throw in certain documents, certain articles, or whatever the case may be, into Notebook LM and creating the podcast, and then just listening to it on a high level has been a lot of fun. Well, it makes learning about things that might be a little more dense and challenging a little bit more fun before I dive back in to actually read the specific documents. So probably Notebook LM's podcast feature.
Nice. Very cool. Very practical too. I appreciate that one. Kenley, it has been such an awesome conversation, and just truly genuinely appreciate hearing your creativity, like your vision for impact and growth, and personal and professional development. For listeners that want to follow you, we'll make sure that we're connecting all of the links to stay up to date on your work, the publications you're putting out here at the bottom of the video, so that folks can check out your work. I just want to say thank you again for the conversation. We've known each other for a while. We constantly see each other, and so getting to just sit down and have this conversation was really enjoyable. And just thank you for your time.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for having me. This was fun. So I like what you guys are doing over here. It's pretty cool. You guys have grown a lot in the last couple of years, so it's dope to see. And it's testament to how hard y'all are working. So keep it up.
We got a good team. Thank you so much for having us, for joining us in the conversation.